She had always believed she knew the world. Growing up in a small village surrounded by wide fields and gentle hills, she thought life was simple, predictable, and safe. The village was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, and the days passed slowly, marked by the rising and setting sun. In the mornings, the smell of fresh bread from the baker's oven drifted through the narrow lanes, mixing with the earthy scent of soil and grass. Chickens clucked in courtyards, and the distant lowing of cows could be heard as farmers led their animals to pasture. Every morning, she would walk along the dirt paths, greeting neighbors who were already busy with their daily tasks. Some women carried baskets of vegetables to trade at the small market, while men tended to the fields, plowing the soil or repairing fences. Children ran around playing simple games, their laughter echoing through the streets. Life was predictable, and she liked it that way. It felt safe, cozy, and familiar. Among the villagers, one person caught her attention more than anyone else. He was a quiet man who lived on the edge of the village, tending a small farm that he managed alone. His days seemed to revolve around the rhythm of the land, plowing, planting, watering, and harvesting. He never sought attention, never boasted about his work, and rarely spoke more than necessary. To most people, he appeared ordinary, perhaps even unremarkable. She had watched him from a distance for months, curious about him but never bold enough to approach him. There was something calm in the way he moved, a stillness that seemed unusual in a world that was always in motion. He rose with the sun and worked tirelessly, his hands covered in soil, his face often shaded by the brim of his worn hat. He did not complain, did not hurry, and never seemed frustrated, even when a stubborn field refused to yield its crops. Watching him, she felt a strange sense of admiration. There was dignity in his simplicity, a quiet strength that did not need to be shown off. Occasionally, she noticed him staring at the horizon, his eyes fixed on something far beyond the village. She wondered what he could be thinking, but whenever she tried to guess, he would lower his gaze and return to his work, as if nothing had happened. There was a mystery about him, a sense that he carried thoughts and experiences she could not see or understand. Yet she never imagined that beneath this calm, ordinary exterior, there was something far more extraordinary. She, like everyone else in the village, believed life was simple, and she assumed he was simple too. The idea that someone could be anything more than what they appeared to be had never crossed her mind. Her world was safe, predictable, and comforting, and she had no reason to question it. The farmer seemed to belong perfectly to this world, as natural as the flowing river or the swaying trees. His presence was steady, almost reassuring, and it made her feel that everything in the village was as it should be. Her own life was ordinary, in its own way. She helped her mother with household chores, tended a small garden behind their home, and occasionally went to the market to trade fruits and vegetables. She enjoyed reading simple stories by candlelight at night and listening to the elders talk about the old days. Her friends were the village children, who ran and played, filled with laughter and energy. Life was uncomplicated, and she liked the comfort it brought. Sometimes she would pass by his farm, pretending to be busy with her own tasks while secretly observing him. She noticed the precision in the way he handled his tools, the careful attention he gave to every seed he planted, and the patience with which he nurtured his crops. Even small tasks like mending a fence or tending to the animals were done with a focus and care that was unusual. There was a rhythm to his work that was almost meditative, a harmony between man and land that she found fascinating. Despite his quiet nature, she felt drawn to him. There was a gentleness in his eyes and a strength in his hands that seemed to tell stories without words. She imagined what his life must have been like, though she could never have guessed the truth. To her, he was a man who had chosen a simple, honest life, one free from the complications of the world outside their village. She admired his calm, his patience, and his ability to exist in such harmony with his surroundings. The village itself was a world apart from the chaos of the towns beyond. There were no rushing crowds, no loud noises, no danger that reached them in their quiet corner of the world. Life was slow, predictable, and safe. People worked hard, but they did not rush. They helped one another and shared what little they had. To her, this was the entire world, and she could not imagine anything beyond it. Yet even in this peaceful world, small hints of something different sometimes appeared. She would notice the farmer's eyes glinting in ways she did not understand, or his hands resting on the handle of a tool with unusual firmness. Occasionally, she caught a flash of something in his expression that suggested experience beyond what she could see. She dismissed these moments as imagination, telling herself that he was just careful, just thoughtful. She could not imagine that the quiet, simple life she saw was only a mask, hiding skills and experiences she had no idea existed. For months, this continued. She watched him. She observed the rhythm of his life, and she built a quiet story in her mind about the kind of man he was. In her eyes, he was a symbol of simplicity, patience, and calm, a man who belonged entirely to the land he worked and the village he lived in. She never imagined that the calm surface of his life was only the beginning, that beneath it lay something powerful, something that would one day change her understanding of the world forever. And so, life went on in the village, steady and predictable with the sun rising and setting each day. She continued her quiet observations, feeling a mixture of admiration and curiosity. She thought she knew him, thought she understood the world, and thought that life would continue in this gentle, comforting way. Little did she know. The world, outside her village and the true nature of the man she thought she understood, was about to reveal itself in ways she could never have imagined. The calm of the village, which had always felt so safe and predictable, was suddenly broken one late afternoon. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the fields, and the air was warm with the promise of evening. Children were still playing near the riverbank, and the women were returning from the market, their baskets full of fresh vegetables and bread. It should have been a normal day, ordinary and quiet, like any other. But then, distant sounds reached the villagers' ears, sounds that no one had expected. Horses' hooves pounded against the earth in the distance, a steady rhythm that grew louder with every passing moment. The villagers paused in their tasks, exchanging worried glances. Some children stopped playing, sensing the tension in the air, and the women clutched their baskets tightly. From the horizon emerged figures mounted on horses, dust rising behind them in heavy clouds. The group was large, moving swiftly, and the sun glinted off their weapons. Bandits. The word spread quickly, whispered first, then shouted as fear rippled through the village. Panic took hold almost instantly. People ran to secure their homes, shutting doors and windows, tying up animals and calling out to family members. The village, usually a place of peace and gentle routines, became a flurry of motion. Mothers scooped up children, men gathered what tools they could use for defense, and the elderly tried to find safety in the corners of their homes. Everyone knew stories of these bandits, how ruthless they were, how they had plundered neighboring villages without mercy. Now it seemed their village was next. She watched from the edge of the square, her heart pounding in her chest. Fear and disbelief mixed in her mind. She had never seen danger so close, never imagined that the quiet world she had grown up in could be threatened in such a sudden and violent way. Her eyes searched for the farmer, hoping he might do something, though she had no idea what he could possibly do against such a force. To her surprise, he was already outside, standing near the edge of his farm. Unlike the others, he did not run. He did not panic. His posture was calm and steady, his eyes focused on the approaching riders. Where the villagers trembled and hid, he moved with deliberate purpose. She could see his hands now, gripping something that glinted faintly in the late sunlight. At first she thought it was just a tool, perhaps a sickle or a long knife used for harvesting crops. But as she watched more closely, a shiver ran down her spine. It was a blade, held firmly, and there was something in the way he held it that told her this was no ordinary farm implement. Her mind raced. Could the quiet, simple man she had always known really be ready to face this danger? The bandits, she realized with a mix of fear and awe, had no idea what they were about to encounter. They laughed as they approached, confident in their strength and numbers, expecting easy victory over a small, unsuspecting village. But the farmer did not flinch. He did not seem afraid, and that calm, steady presence made her stomach twist, in both anxiety and curiosity. As the first riders drew closer, he moved forward, not in a rush, not in panic, but with careful, controlled steps. Every motion was precise, deliberate. She could see the way his fingers adjusted the grip of the blade, the way his eyes measured distance and speed. It was unlike anything she had ever seen before. The movements were not just skillful, they were practiced, trained, and purposeful. Her previous ideas about him, about his simple life and quiet nature, began to crumble. This was not just a Mawam man who worked the land. This was someone who knew how to protect, how to fight, how to survive in ways she had never imagined. The bandits reached the edge of the village and shouted threats, waving their weapons as if to intimidate anyone who might challenge them. The villagers shrank back, some frozen in fear, others hiding behind walls and carts. The children clung to their mothers, their eyes wide with terror. Yet the farmer stood his ground, unyielding. In a moment that felt almost unreal, he moved. His first strike was fast, precise, and effective. One bandit, the apparent leader, found himself disarmed and thrown back with a skillful maneuver she could barely comprehend. Another attempted to strike, only to be intercepted with swift, calculated motions that used the man's strength and balance to their maximum effect. She could see the difference between raw strength and mastery. He had both, and he used them with remarkable intelligence. She felt a mixture of fear, admiration, and disbelief. This was the same man she had always observed quietly from afar, the same calm, simple farmer who seemed content with his life of planting and harvesting. And yet, here he was, moving with a skill and power that suggested a history she had never imagined. Each motion of his blade was controlled, purposeful, and protective. Every bandit who tried to advance was met with resistance that was precise, efficient, and almost elegant. The villagers began to emerge cautiously from their hiding places, watching in awe as he defended them. Men who had once mocked or underestimated him now looked on with respect and wonder. Even those who were skilled in farming, who had strong arms from working the fields, could see that his abilities were extraordinary. Children peeked from behind walls, whispering in disbelief. The quiet man who had once seemed ordinary was now a shield, a protector who had risen to meet the danger with courage and unmatched skill. She could not tear her eyes away. The calm, composed figure in front of her now held a presence she could hardly describe. There was authority in his stance, intelligence in his actions, and a quiet ferocity that sent a clear message. He would not let anyone harm this village. Her previous assumptions about him, about the simplicity of his life, shattered with every precise movement of his hands, every shift in his stance, every thoughtful strike against the intruders. When the bandits finally realized that their confidence had been misplaced, they began to retreat, confusion and fear replacing their earlier arrogance. The villagers, previously terrified, began to cheer softly, though still cautiously, for their unexpected hero. She ran to him, her mind still trying to process what she had seen. The man she thought she knew, the quiet farmer who had seemed so ordinary, was anything but. For the first time, she felt a mixture of awe, curiosity, and a new kind of respect. The world she thought was predictable and safe had shown its unexpected dangers, and the man she thought she understood had revealed hidden depths she could not have imagined. The simple life she had known was only a surface, and beneath it lay a history, skill, and courage that would forever change the way she saw him and perhaps the world itself. The villagers had never witnessed anything like it before. The quiet farmer, the man they had always known as calm and unremarkable, had revealed a side of himself that no one could have imagined. The bandits, who had ridden into the village with arrogance and confidence, were now faced with someone who moved with precision and skill that seemed almost impossible. Every step he took, every movement of his blade was deliberate and controlled, as if he had done this countless times before. She watched, her heart pounding, unable to believe what she was seeing. The farmer's movements were not hurried or frantic. Instead, they were smooth, almost graceful, as he intercepted attacks, deflected strikes, and kept the bandits at bay. Each motion seemed to flow naturally into the next, like a dance, but one with very high stakes. There was no hesitation, no wasted energy. He used their own momentum against them, redirecting their force in ways that sent them stumbling or losing balance. One of the bandits lunged at him with a sword, aiming for his side. In a flash, the farmer stepped aside, twisting his body just enough to avoid the strike, and with a swift motion of his blade, disarmed the attacker. The man fell back stunned while the farmer's eyes remained calm and focused, scanning the movements of the others. Another bandit tried to sneak up from behind, but the farmer sensed him instantly, turning just in time to block the attack and push him back with a precise strike. The villagers, hiding behind walls and carts, could barely comprehend what they were seeing. The man they had believed to be simple, the quiet farmer who worked his fields and spoke little, was now a force of protection, courage, and skill. They watched in awe as he moved, each action efficient and purposeful, every motion showing not just strength but intelligence. This was not the work of a man untrained. It was the work of someone who had spent years mastering the art of defense and combat. She could feel her mind racing, trying to understand how this man could be capable of such things. She had seen him working in the fields, tending his crops, caring for his animals. He had always seemed gentle, humble, almost ordinary. And yet now, in this moment of danger, he was extraordinary. The blade in his hands was not just a weapon. It was an extension of himself, moving with his thoughts, his instincts, and his will. One by one, the bandits began to falter. Their confidence, which had been so strong when they first arrived, now wavered in the face of his skill. Some tried to regroup, attempting to attack together, but the farmer anticipated their movements, countering with a series of swift, precise strikes that kept them off balance. He moved with a rhythm that seemed impossible to predict, a combination of speed, strategy, and intuition that left the attackers scrambling. She noticed how calm he remained throughout. There was no anger, no aggression beyond what was necessary. He was not enjoying the fight, nor was he reckless. Each strike, each movement, was calculated to protect the village and its people. She could see the thought behind every action, the careful observation, the quick decisions that made him so effective. It was not brute force that made him powerful. It was skill, experience, and intelligence. The children, who had been hiding with their mothers, peeked out from behind walls and fences, their eyes wide with amazement. The older villagers, who had once doubted his abilities or dismissed him as ordinary, now whispered to one another in disbelief. Even those who had seen fights before, or who had some experience with defending themselves, could see that this man was exceptional. His calm determination, his mastery of movement, and his ability to control the flow of battle were beyond anything they had imagined. At one point, the bandit leader tried to strike again, this time with more caution. He circled the farmer, looking for an opening, but the farmer was ready. In a swift motion, he anticipated the leader's move, sidestepped, and disarmed him in a single, fluid strike. The bandit leader fell back, dazed and defeated, while the others hesitated, unsure of how to continue. The villagers began to cheer quietly, not daring to fully celebrate, but feeling relief that their protector was stronger than any danger they had faced. She could hardly keep her eyes off him. The quiet, humble man she had thought she knew had revealed layers of skill, experience, and bravery that left her in awe. She realized that all the years of observing him in the fields, watching him tend his animals, and noticing the calm intensity in his eyes had been pieces of a much larger picture. The man had been training, learning, and preparing in ways she could never have imagined, and now those hidden talents had emerged in the moment when they were needed most. As the battle continued, she noticed how he moved with a balance that seemed impossible to achieve. Every step, every swing of the blade was controlled and precise. He used the terrain to his advantage, maneuvering around carts, walls, and fences with ease. He was aware of every angle, every possible threat, and his decisions were instant and perfect. She realized that this was not just skill, It was instinct, honed by years of experience, a combination of training and intuition that made him nearly unbeatable. Slowly, the bandits began to retreat. Their confidence had crumbled, replaced by fear and confusion. The villagers, who had feared the worst, now began to emerge from their hiding places, watching as the man who had seemed ordinary turned the tide of danger with calm, measured skill. She ran toward him, feeling a mixture of relief, admiration, and curiosity. The man who had seemed so simple, so quiet, had revealed a strength that was extraordinary in every sense. When the last of the bandits fled, the village was silent for a moment, the tension slowly giving way to relief. The villagers looked around, realizing that the threat had passed, and their eyes turned to the farmer who had protected them. They began to cheer softly, expressing gratitude and admiration for the man who had saved their homes, their families, and their lives. She stood among them, still trying to process what she had witnessed. The quiet farmer, who had always seemed so ordinary, had revealed a hidden side of himself that no one could have imagined. His skill, his courage, and his intelligence had saved the village, and she realized that the man she thought she knew was far more complex and extraordinary than she had ever believed. The world she thought was simple had shown her a deeper truth. Appearances could be deceiving, and the quietest people often held the greatest strength. As the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows across the village, she watched him stand among the villagers, calm and composed once again. The battle was over, but the impression it left on her was lasting. The man she had thought she understood had shown her a side of life, courage, and skill that she had never imagined. And for the first time, she realized that the world was not as predictable as she had believed, and that true strength often lay hidden beneath calm, ordinary surfaces. The village was slowly returning to its usual rhythm, though a quiet excitement lingered in the air. The bandits were gone, the fields were safe, and the villagers were beginning to talk in hushed voices about what they had witnessed. But she could not stop thinking about the farmer. The calm, quiet man she had known for so long had revealed a side of himself that left her in awe. His skill, his precision, his courage, they were beyond anything she had imagined. She knew that the answer to this mystery lay somewhere in his past, and she felt a growing curiosity to understand him fully. One evening, as the village settled into the soft glow of sunset, she found herself walking toward his small farm. The air was cool, carrying the scent of freshly tilled earth and wildflowers. She approached him carefully, unsure of how to begin. Finally she spoke, her voice quiet but steady. How did you do it? How did you protect the village like that?" He looked at her, his eyes calm, and gestured for her to sit beside him. For a long moment he remained silent, watching the sun dip below the hills. Then he began to speak, not hurriedly, not with pride, but with a quiet honesty that made her lean closer, eager to listen. "I was not always a farmer," he said softly. "I have lived a different life, one far from these fields. Many years ago I traveled to distant lands, places filled with danger and conflict. I trained under masters who taught me how to defend, how to move with precision, and how to protect those who could not protect themselves. It was a life of discipline, of constant learning, and sometimes of great loss." She listened in silence, her eyes wide with fascination. The calm man who had always seemed so ordinary was now revealing a history she could never have imagined. His words painted a picture of a past filled with adventure, danger, and rigorous training. She realized that every careful motion, every precise strike with the blade had been born from years of experience and dedication. He continued, describing how circumstances had forced him to leave that life behind. He had sought peace, a quiet place where he could live simply, away from the chaos of the outside world. The village had seemed perfect for this, a place where life was gentle, predictable, and safe. Yet, he had never forgotten the lessons he had learned, nor the responsibilities he carried. When danger arrived at the village, those skills had awakened, protecting not just himself but everyone around him. She could hardly believe the story. The man she had watched quietly for months, who seemed so content with the rhythm of farm. Life had once been trained in distant lands, mastering arts that few could ever hope to learn. The quiet patience she had admired was not just a trait of simplicity, it was the calm of someone who had faced challenges far greater than any the village could imagine. For the first time, she saw him differently. She saw the strength beneath, the calm, the experience beneath the ordinary exterior. She realized that courage and skill were often hidden, waiting for the right moment to emerge. Her admiration grew into something deeper, respect, awe, and a desire to understand him more fully. As the evening wore on, they spoke quietly about his past, about the challenges he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. He did not speak to boast, but to share the truth of who he was. She began to understand that the calm, simple life of the farmer was a choice, a deliberate path to protect both himself and the people he cared about. His skills were not for show. They were for the moments when they were needed most. She thought about the villagers who had witnessed his bravery but did not know the full story. They had seen his actions but not the history behind them. She realized how easy it is to judge others by what is visible, without knowing the layers beneath. The farmer had lived a life full of experience, yet he had chosen to remain quiet, blending into the peaceful rhythm of village life. That night, as stars began to fill the sky, she walked home slowly, thinking about the man she had thought she knew. Every previous assumption about him had been challenged. Every idea of what it meant to be ordinary had been changed. She understood now that true strength was not always loud or visible. Sometimes it was quiet, patient, and waiting for the moment, when it was truly needed. From that day on, her view of him and of the world shifted. She began to see that people often carry hidden stories, hidden talents, and hidden courage. The farmer was proof of this, a living example that calm surfaces could hide extraordinary depths. She realized that understanding someone fully required more than observation. It required curiosity, attention, and sometimes the willingness to listen to stories that were never spoken before. The days that followed brought a new sense of peace to the village. The bandits had gone and life slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. Children ran and played again, women traded goods at the market, and the farmers returned to their fields. Yet she noticed subtle changes in how the villagers looked at the farmer. There was respect now, mingled with awe, a recognition of the strength and skill that had protected them all. She, however, saw more than admiration. She saw the complexity of the man behind the calm exterior, the careful choice to live simply, despite extraordinary abilities. Each time she observed him tending his crops or helping neighbors, she thought of the story he had shared, of the training and experiences that had shaped him. She began to notice the small details, the way his hands moved with precision, the way his eyes watched the world with careful attention, the quiet confidence in his posture. Over time, her curiosity grew into a quiet understanding. She realized that life, like people, was layered. The world could not be judged by appearances alone. Those who seemed ordinary could be extraordinary. Those who were quiet could hold great strength, and those who lived simply could have stories richer than anyone could imagine. She spent hours walking through the fields with him, asking questions, listening to fragments of his past, learning from his insights. The more she listened, the more she understood that courage and wisdom were not always visible. That true strength often lay in patience, calm, and careful preparation. She began to see how the skills he had once used in faraway lands had shaped him into a protector, a teacher, and a guide for those around him. Their conversations became a bridge connecting her understanding of the world with his experiences. She learned to see beyond the surface, to appreciate the quiet acts of strength, and to recognize that ordinary life could hide extraordinary potential. She felt a deep respect for him, not just for the way he defended the village, but for the way he chose to live, balancing skill with humility, power with kindness, and experience with patience. In the evenings, as the sky turned shades of pink and orange, she would sit beside him, listening to his stories and sharing her own thoughts. They spoke of the world beyond the village, of distant places, and of lessons learned through challenge and patience. She felt a connection that went beyond admiration. It was understanding, trust, and a sense of shared respect. She knew that she would never see him the same way again. The simple farmer had become a symbol of hidden strength, courage, and wisdom. He had taught her that life was rarely what it seemed, and that understanding required more than observation. It required listening, reflection, and openness to the unexpected. And she realized that in knowing him, she had learned something about herself as well. The value of patience, courage, and quiet strength in a world that often seemed unpredictable. The village continued to thrive under the protection of the man they had once thought was ordinary. She observed him daily, her admiration growing alongside a deeper understanding of his character. He was patient with children, gentle with animals, and kind to neighbors, yet she never forgot the extraordinary skill he had displayed. The memory of the battle remained vivid in her mind, a reminder of the hidden depths that lay beneath calm exteriors. She realized that life itself was full of surprises, and that courage, wisdom, and strength often resided in unexpected places. People, like the quiet farmer, could carry histories, talents, and experiences hidden beneath ordinary appearances. And she understood finally that true understanding came from paying attention, listening carefully, and being willing to see beyond what was visible. The world seemed larger now, filled with possibilities she had never considered. And at the center of this realization was the man she had once thought she knew, the simple farmer, whose calm exterior had concealed a life rich with skill, experience, and courage. In his presence, she learned that life was never as simple as it seemed, and that true greatness often came quietly, revealed only in moments when it was needed most.